Squatting and lunging are amazing body weight exercises, and for some people it causes pain, or those exercises cause pain in various parts of the body, but usually it's the knees. And almost every single person I've ever trained that has complained of knee pain during those exercises has been able to do it successfully without knee pain, because we are shifting how the body is being used. So it's all about form. So one thing that I want you to think about is that just like the standing posture video, you want to load the heel in your squat. So we'll start with squats. So we're going to turn your toes out to about 11 and 1 o'clock. I use that as a guideline because we know that if you have your feet externally rotated, there's going to be more freedom in your hips. And if you go too far, for most people, you start to limit that freedom again. So a moderate rotation, but 11 and 1 o'clock is a good place to start to experiment with your body. And then you want to make sure that the heels are loaded. So now I'm going to turn so you can see my profile. If you start to bend your knees and your hips kind of stay over your heels, you'll have a very limited range of motion. Your ankles will stop you, your lower back will start to tuck under a little bit, and your knees will bear a lot more of the weight, your quads and knees. This is very little glute and hamstring. This is what I see people doing in a squat a lot. Rounding the back, tucking the pelvis under, knees shoved forward, pelvis is too far forward. This is likely to cause knee pain. So when you bend your knees, you want to feel a hip hinge. That's different than arching the back. So that's another pitfall, is we want to get the booty to go back, so you stick it out. I want you to keep the same relationship between your pelvis and your rib cage and start to hip hinge, which means fold in the front of your hips as you bend your knees. So your butt starts to travel back and your knees start to bend without traveling too far forward, and you haven't caused a big arch in your back, but you've also avoided that tuck and round. So again, rib cage and pelvis stay the same relationship as your butt starts to travel back and you hip hinge as you bend your knees. So you want to feel like your sits bones are spreading, and that will help you to feel that glute engagement. And your knees generally don't travel forward of your toes. Everybody is different, but that's a good rule of thumb, that you don't want to have your knees travel forward of your toes in a squat. So sometimes I'll have people just run their hands down and let your fingertips point at your toes or the midfoot. You feel that you can wiggle your toes, the weight is in your heels, the sits bones are spreading. Now, if you break parallel and the pelvis starts to tuck under just a slight amount, every body is different again, it depends on the shape of your femur head and your hip socket. That's okay in a very small dose. But if you start to really round and break that chain, that muscular chain in the back, the posterior chain of your hamstrings, your butt, and your back, then you're going to start to stress out your back again, as well as your knees most likely. So you really want to think about that back staying pretty straight and the hips sinking down and up without a whole lot of change in the position of your spine, and definitely keeping the heels loaded and the hips traveling back to initiate. Lunging is a very similar principle as far as wanting to load the heel, but of course you're in a split stance. So if I'm going to step forward in a lunge, I want to have a big enough step that when the knee bends, it's not shoving too far forward and the body weight isn't forward. As soon as your body weight is forward of your hips and over this front knee and the forefoot, again, you're going to get a lot of pressure in your knee. So you want to come back here, bend this back knee enough that your pelvis can come to a little bit more of a neutral position. So not only is there magic in getting this leg to load, also there is magic in getting this hip flexor to stretch. So as soon as we correct the pelvis position, I'm now much more in this heel and this butt cheek and hamstring, and I'm feeling a nice stretch in this hip. And if I wasn't, then this leg would need to come a little bit further back for me to feel that feeling. So if you're here and you don't quite feel it, then split that stance a little bigger, point the tailbone down, open the front of the hip of the leg that's stepping back, and feel that the leg that's forward is loaded more in the heel. Then you go down, you feel an increased stretch, but you don't go forward as you go down, because then you're loading your quad again. So this starts off sometimes with a pull to help with balance while you find that pelvis position. The ribs drop, the pelvis comes to neutral, and then you go straight down and up, and now you're getting an awesome stretch in the back hip, and you're loading the quad or the glute and the hamstring of the front leg. Now, when you're doing alternating lunges, you may not take that big of a step every time, and so, you know, your knee may pass your toes. if you still keep your body upright, if you still keep your pelvis in a neutral position, you're still going to feel the engagement happen in the glutes and the hamstrings rather than dumping into your knee. So I hope those guidelines help you find a more beneficial squat and lunge so that you can use them, because they're awesome to build a powerful tush, which is amazing for core. It's great for your hips and your lower back to be healthy. And also, you know, the booty is the thing these days. So if you have a healthy lunge and squat, you can have all of the health and figure benefits without any of the pain or stress on your body.